National Assembly leader Juan Guaido to oust the embattled President Nicolas Maduro. Guaido, flanked by soldiers, urged the military to join him in taking control of the country. That call unleashed violent protests and clashes in Caracas and other cities across the country. A warning: the video of one incident you're about to see is extremely graphic. It happened near a government airbase in Caracas. A military vehicle plows into a crowd of protesters, knocking a number of people to the ground. At least 71 people have been injured, most from rubber bullets. According to the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Nicolas Maduro had an airplane waiting on the tarmac to take him to Cuba early on Tuesday. But the Russians talked him out of it. Mr. Maduro remained defiant in an address to the nation late on Tuesday. Joining me now from Washington, Michael Shifter, president of the Inter-American Dialogue, a network of global leaders dedicated to democracy and prosperity in Latin America. Okay, good to have you with us, sir. So, all of this unfolded. The opposition leader, Juan Guaido, essentially declared the beginning of the end of the Maduro regime. He said he had the backing of the military. Listen to this.
For many years, we've talked to the armed forces, and today it's clear to us that the armed forces are with the Venezuelan people and not with the dictator.
So, Michael, given how events played out over the day, that just doesn't seem to be the case. That is not the reality. He does not have the bulk of the military with him.
Correct. He was hoping that he'd have the military switch, just like he wanted this to happen when he first emerged on the scene in January, and then in February with the humanitarian aid effort on the border. And this was a bold and brazen move today, and he has more military on his side today than he did yesterday, but certainly not enough to topple this regime. And so I think what we saw today, that this regime is dug in and still has the top brass backing Nicolas Maduro.
So on Twitter, Maduro, earlier in the day, we didn't see a lot of him, but we saw the tweet. He said the military, the commanders were remaining loyal. He'd spoken to them. They were all standing firm. And we also saw him doing that national address on television, a few hours ago. He was surrounded by senior political figures as well as senior figures from the military. The message was quite obvious that, the military was still with him. So if there's no overwhelming numbers of defections and the uprising today ends with a whimper, where does that leave the opposition? And in particular, where does it leave Guaido?
Well, Guaido is determined to sustain the pressure to keep it up. He's calling for people to go to the streets tomorrow. And he still is very much committed to a democratic transition in Venezuela, but he has encountered very formidable obstacles. And the main question is what the armed forces are going to do. I think more than Guaido, what happens to Guaido is what happens to the military. Does this really shake the military a little bit? And will the military really keep Maduro or not? I think that is the big question. And if they don't, what kind of government would they have? Would they align with Guaido, or would they pursue their own kind of government, either a repressive government or a more open democratic government? I think that's a possible scenario, because I think the military realizes now that even though Guaido failed in his effort, that this regime is not sustainable, and it's better to try to work something out rather than the situation end in a bloodbath.
I'm just wondering, though, you only get so many times when you can say the military is with me when they're not, and then it comes down to a question of credibility, right?
Right. No, absolutely. No, I mean, and I think that's the risk for Guaido, that many people who have been following him and believing in him will become discouraged and disappointed, and will become frustrated, because he's promised that this will happen. He's taken very bold steps, very courageous steps, but it hasn't turned out that way. He's committed to continuing. He's not going to give up. The slim ray of hope is that the military will realize that Guaido is very fierce and very relentless, and will try to figure out a way within the military itself to try to negotiate an end to this crisis. It may not be an end that includes Guaido. They may take the power into their own hands and pursue a different course. But I think they may be realizing what's happening every day is that this regime is under enormous pressure domestically and internationally, even though the government did not fall today.
Well, we've the added pressure now is coming from the US president, and it's actually going on to Cuba. He's warned Havana via tweet that they will be facing sanctions and an embargo again if Cuban forces in Venezuela, who are there to support Maduro if they do not leave, fairly promptly, I think was the word. It seems like we're heading back to the days of the Cold War. How big of a role are the Cubans playing when it comes to propping up the Maduro regime?
Well, that's a question that's quite controversial, and there are lots of people on different sides of that question. I think clearly they started by providing medical help and social help and sending Cuban doctors to Venezuela during Hugo Chavez. And there clearly is support now for some intelligence services and security to prop up and support the Maduro regime. The Cubans need Maduro. Maduro still gives oil to Cuba, and without the Venezuelan support, Cuba's economy would completely collapse. So there's a strong dependency there, and I think that what Trump is trying to do by President Trump is threatening Cuba, obviously hasn't worked. It hasn't worked for 6 decades, and I don't think there's any chance that the Cubans will back off supporting Maduro in the face of such threats. It clearly has been demonstrated over a period of time that does not work. It does not change Cuban behavior.
Michael, we're out of time. We'll leave it there, but we appreciate you being with us. Michael Shifter, President of the Inter-American Dialogue there in Washington. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Take a short break. We're still waiting for those first remarks from Japan's new emperor now that he has taken the chrysanthemum throne. When that happens, we'll bring it to you live.